The air in the bank always felt stolen. It was the same recycled, faintly metallic air you breathe on an airplane, thin and sterile. It was Friday afternoon, that sluggish, heavy part of the day when all you can think about is the weekend. For me, this Friday was bigger than that. It was the finish line of a marathon I'd been running for 3 years. In my purse, tucked safely in a side pocket, were the signed papers for the lease. A small, sun-drenched space that was about to become Sarah's spoon. My very own bakery. All I needed was the cashier's check. The final piece of the puzzle. The line was long, snaking back from the teller windows almost to the heavy glass doors. I took my place behind a man in a paint-splattered jumpsuit and let out a soft sigh. Patience, Sarah, I told myself. My grandmother's voice, warm and steady as a sunrise, echoed in my head. Patience is a virtue, child, but don't ever let them mistake your patience for weakness. I smiled a little to myself. She'd be so proud. Up ahead, behind the polished counter, were 2 tellers. A young woman with bleached blonde hair pulled into a tight, high ponytail, and a man with a slicked-back haircut who looked like he spent more time on his hair than on his work. They were laughing with each other, their voices a little too loud for the quiet hum of the bank. I recognized them. Jessica and Mark, they were always working this shift, and their customer service was, well, let's just say it lacked warmth. I spent the next 20 minutes shuffling forward, inch by inch. I scrolled through pictures of my new shop on my phone, imagining the scent of cinnamon rolls and fresh brewed coffee filling the air. I could already see the glass display case, filled with my grandmother's recipes: lemon pound cake, sweet potato pie, cookies the size of your palm. This wasn't just a business. It was my heart, my history, all baked into something I could share. The money I was about to move was everything I had. My life savings, a small inheritance from my grandmother, and every penny I'd scraped together working 2 jobs. It was a terrifying amount, but it was for my dream. Finally, it was my turn. The man in the jumpsuit finished his transaction, and I stepped forward. Hi there, I said, offering a small, polite smile to the blonde teller, Jessica. I need to get a cashier's check, please. Jessica didn't look up from her screen. She just held out a hand, wiggling her fingers impatiently. I slid my debit card and my driver's license under the glass. She took them, her long acrylic nails tapping a rapid, annoying rhythm on the counter. She glanced at my ID, then at me, then back at the ID. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips. She leaned over to Mark, who was pretending to organize a stack of papers at his own station. Hey, Mark, she said, not bothering to lower her voice. Listen to this. She then turned her attention back to me, her voice taking on a syrupy, exaggerated sweetness. Hi there, she mimicked, her pitch rising in a mocking imitation of my own greeting. I need to get a cashier's cheek, please, Mark snickered. A short, sharp sound that cut through the quiet bank. A hot coil tightened in my stomach. For a second, I thought I must have imagined it. People didn't do that. Not grown-ups. Not in a professional place of business, right to your face. But the look they shared, a quick conspiratorial glance, confirmed it. They were making fun of me. Of the way I spoke. My voice is clear. It's the voice of a woman from the South. A voice that carries the warmth of my upbringing, the politeness my grandmother insisted upon. It's my voice. And they had twisted it into a caricature, a joke for their own afternoon amusement. I felt my cheeks flush with heat. Every person in the line behind me suddenly felt like an audience. I felt small, shrunk down to the size of their petty cruelty. My first instinct was to shrink away, to get my check and leave as quickly as possible, to pretend it didn't happen. Just get the check, Sarah. Don't make a scene. So I tried. I took a deep breath, pushing down the anger and the humiliation. The check needs to be made out to Fairview Commercial Properties, I said, my voice a little shakier than I wanted. Jessica's smirk widened. She turned to Mark again. Fairview Commercial Properties, she repeated, drawing out the vowels in a cartoonish drawl. Mark laughed out loud this time. He shook his head as if he just couldn't believe how hilarious I was. That was it. The coil in my stomach snapped. The humiliation curdled into a cold, quiet anger. My grandmother's other words came to me then. Respect is not something you beg for, child. It's something you demand up. I stood up straighter. I looked Jessica directly in the eye, my own gaze steady and unblinking. The polite, accommodating smile was gone from my face. I'm sorry, I said, my voice low and even. Is there a problem here? Jessica's playful expression faltered. She blinked, taken aback by my directness. No problem, she said, her tone suddenly clipped and defensive. Just getting your information. It didn't seem like that, I replied, my voice still quiet, but firm. It seemed like you and your colleague were mocking me. Mark stopped his fake shuffling and scowled at me. We were just having a conversation, he snapped. Not everything is about you. Your conversation was about me, I stated plainly. You are mimicking my voice. Both of you. The line behind me had gone completely silent. I could feel their eyes on my back. Jessica's face was turning a blotchy reed. I don't know what you're talking about, she lied, unable to meet my eyes. She started typing furiously on her keyboard. What's the account number? I'd like to speak to your manager, I said. The words hung in the air. It felt like a point of no return. Jessica let out an exasperated sigh. He's busy. I'm sure he is, I said. I'll wait. She and Mark exchanged another look, this one filled with annoyance. She picked up her phone, mumbled something into it, and slammed it down. He'll be out in a minute, she said, pointedly turning her back to me to serve the next customer. Even though my transaction wasn't finished. So I waited. I stepped to the side, my arms crossed over my chest. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I felt exposed, every nerve ending tingling. Part of me wanted to bolt, to just run out the door and go to a different branch, a different bank. But I thought of my grandmother. I thought of every time I'd bitten my tongue, every time I'd swallowed a casual slight to keep the peace. Not today. Not on the day I was claiming my dream. A man in a slightly rumpled suit came out of a back office. He had a harried look on his face and a name tag that read Mr. Henderson. Is there a problem out here? He asked, his eyes scanning the tense scene. Jessica immediately launched into her defense. This woman is accusing us of making fun of her. We were just talking, and she's being overly sensitive. Mr. Henderson looked at me, his expression a careful mask of neutrality. Ma'am, my tellers are professionals. I'm sure there's just been a misunderstanding. It was the classic brush-off. The corporate pacification technique. You're hysterical. You misunderstood. Let's all just calm down. The anger in my chest burned a little hotter. There was no misunderstanding, I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. I greeted your teller, Jessica, and she mimicked my voice to your other teller, Mark, who laughed. When I gave her the name for the check, she did it again, and he laughed again. It was deliberate, it was unprofessional, and it was humiliating. Mr. Henderson glanced at his employees. They both shook their heads, performing their innocence. He turned back to me, his mouth set in a thin line. I understand you feel that way, but it's not a feeling, I interrupted, my patience gone. It's a fact. It's what happened. Are you telling me that in this bank, in front of a line of customers, this is acceptable behavior? He sighed, a long-suffering sound. Look, I apologize if you were offended, he said. The classic non-apology. I'm sorry for your feelings, not for our actions. What can we do to resolve this so you can get on with your day? He thought I wanted a simple apology. He thought I wanted to be placated so he could get back to his paperwork. He had completely misread the situation. He had completely misread me. I looked at him, then at Jessica and Mark, who were now watching with smug satisfaction, confident their manager would handle the difficult customer. And that's when I knew exactly what I had to do. I took a breath. You're right, I said, my tone shifting. Mr. Henderson looked relieved. You can resolve this. I don't want the cashier's check anymore. He smiled, thinking he'd won. Okay, well, if you change your mind. Oh, I haven't changed my mind about the check, I said, cutting him off. I still need one. But I won't be getting it from this account. Because I'm here today to close my accounts. All of them. The silence that followed was profound. It was like all the stolen air had been sucked out of the room. Mr. Henderson's smile vanished. Jessica's jaw dropped. Mark's smug expression dissolved into confusion. Excuse me? Mr. Henderson said, his voice a little faint. My checking account, I began, ticking them off on my fingers. My savings account? My business savings account, which holds the capital for the bakery I'm opening. And the small investment portfolio my grandmother left me that your financial advisor handles. I want to close all of it. And I want the full balance in a single cashier's check made out to me. Today. Right now. Mr. Henderson's face went pale. He knew, as I knew, that this wasn't a matter of a few $100s. This was a substantial amount of money. The kind of money that makes a branch manager's performance metrics look very, very good. The kind of money that, when it walks out the door, makes his bosses ask questions. Ma'am, he started, his voice now laced with panic. Let's not be hasty. We can talk about this. Perhaps we can offer you a gesture of our apology, some fee waivers, a better rate. The time for apologies is over, Mr. Henderson, I said calmly. The time for gestures is over. I don't do business with people who don't respect me. I don't entrust my life savings, the legacy of my grandmother, to an institution that employs people who mock their customers for a cheap laugh. Now, are you going to help me close my accounts, or do I need to call your corporate office from right here in your lobby and explain why I'm taking my business elsewhere? I pulled out my phone. I wasn't bluffing. Mr. Henderson looked like he'd been struck. He shot a venomous glare at Jessica and Mark, who both suddenly looked terrified. The consequences of their little joke were blooming in front of them, and the color was draining from their faces. No, that won't be necessary, he said quickly.
He gestured for me to come to an empty desk near the back. Please, right this way, Miss.
He paused, realizing he didn't even know my name. It's on the ID your teller was so amused by, I said coolly. He flinched. He led me to the desk and scurried back to the teller line. Jessica, give me her information. Mark, close your window. We need to process a full account closure. The people in line began to grumble. Their wait was about to get much longer. The branch, for all intents and purposes, was grinding to a halt to deal with the fallout of my decision. They were shutting down in a way. Not with a flick of a switch, but with the slow, deliberate process of disentangling a major customer from their books. Because two of their employees couldn't be decent, the next hour was a masterclass in frantic, backpedaling bureaucracy. Mr. Henderson was on the phone, getting authorizations. He was typing, his face slick with sweat. He kept shooting me nervous glances as if I might change my mind. I just sat there, calm and resolute, watching the chaos I had created, not with malice, but with a profound sense of reclaimed dignity. Jessica had to bring me the paperwork. She approached the desk with her head down, refusing to look at me. Her hands were trembling as she passed me the forms. There was no mockery in her posture now, only fear. I took the papers without a word. I didn't feel triumph, not in a gloating way. I just felt a quiet, sad certainty. This was the only language they understood. Not pleas for decency, not complaints, but consequences. The cold, hard math of a balance sheet dot as I signed the final form. Mr. Henderson made one last, desperate attempt. "Miss James," he said, his voice pleading. "On behalf of the bank, I want to offer my sincerest apology for the behavior of my staff. It will be dealt with, I assure you. Severely, please reconsider. We value your business." I looked up from the paper, my pen still in my hand. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice soft but clear. "You didn't value my business. You valued my money. There's a difference. You had a chance to value the person attached to that money. When I first came to you, you had a chance to simply listen and validate a customer who was treated poorly. You chose to dismiss me. You chose to protect them." I pushed the signed forms across the desk. "The only thing you're sorry about is the number on that check, and that's why I'm leaving. You can deal with your staff however you see fit. My concern is my own peace of mind." He deflated, all the fight gone out of him. He nodded numbly and went to finalize the check. A few minutes later, he returned and slid it across the desk. A single slip of paper that held my entire past and my entire future. I picked it up, folded it carefully, and placed it in my purse right next to the signed lease. I stood up. The entire bank was watching me. The line was now twice as long as when I arrived. Jessica and Mark were standing by their stations like statues, their faces pale. I walked towards the door, my steps feeling lighter than they had in years. As my hand touched the cool metal of the door handle, I paused and looked back at Mr. Henderson. "You know," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room, "my grandmother used to say that a person's character isn't shown in how they treat their equals, but in how they treat those they think they have power over. You all should think about that." And with that, I walked out. The city air, even with its exhaust fumes and noise, felt cleaner and fresher than the sterile air of the bank. The sun was warm on my skin. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt powerful. Not because of the money in my purse, but because I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be small. I had demanded my respect, and when it wasn't given, I had walked away with my dignity intact. I walked the 3 blocks to my little shop, the future home of Sarah's Spoon. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunbeams slanting through the large front window. It was empty, a blank canvas. But standing there in the quiet, dusty space, I didn't see emptiness. I saw potential. I saw cinnamon rolls and laughter. I saw a community gathering place built on warmth and respect. I took the check out of my purse and looked at it. It wasn't just a check anymore. It was a declaration. It was the first brick in the foundation of my new life, a life where I would never ever let anyone mistake my patience for weakness again. And in that quiet, sun-filled room, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. The marathon was over. It was time to start baking.